Hi, good morning slash afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. I hope everybody's enjoying the rest of the conference so far. Welcome to our workshop about designing your own VR or virtual reality educational content. My name is Mary Ju Baluyat. I'm a pediatric emergency medicine fellow at NYU Langone and Bellevue hospitals. I also have a background in video making and spent my fellowship working on new and innovative ways to educate residents in collaboration with our simulation department. Next year, I'm excited to start a simulation fellowship at Indiana University and Riley Children's Hospital.
Hi all, welcome. I'm Janice. I'm a second year simulation fellow currently at NYU. I'll be graduating in a month and will be going to Columbia as a simulation faculty. I'm so excited to have you all here today.
And we also collaborated with Shannon McNamara, who unfortunately could not join us today. But we'd like to get to know you guys as well. Please take a moment to scan this QR code with your phone camera or follow the link that Janice is going to paste in the comment section to complete our pre-workshop survey. It should just take just a couple minutes to complete and helps give us an idea of your backgrounds and how to improve this workshop for the future. Some disclosures before we get started. We will be discussing specific products and equipment that our equipment used to create our projects. We are not endorsing these products and we do not receive any compensation for these from these companies, and we have no financial relationships with them. So we've all likely experienced very similar struggles this last year coming up with effective ways to educate our residents and med students, but also maintain safety and social distancing. Our goal for this workshop is to equip you with the skills, basic knowledge, and inspiration to create your own immersive educational content with 360-degree video cameras and editing software. So we want to share the preparation and production process that we went through to create our immersive videos and give you ideas on how to design appropriate educational content that's best portrayed this way. Later on, we'll also discuss psychological safety considerations when creating video recordings for people featured within the videos and your learners who are viewing them later. We do like this to be an interactive discussion as much as possible. We're probably all aware now of the limitations of in-person and virtual education, but we'd like to keep this engaging and make this an open forum for your questions and ideas. So please use the comment box on the side to ask any questions you might have, and we'll try to address them either during the talk or towards the end. We'd also love to hear your ideas about what you'd like to see for your own virtual simulations. Please feel free to share these in the comments as well if you'd like to discuss them further. And as you saw already, we'll also be using QR codes just a couple more times in our workshop. One of them will show an example of a 360-degree video, so have your smartphones ready so that you can view it on your phone. You need the YouTube app in order to see that video properly, and so download the YouTube app now if you don't have it already so that you can see that. The video, again, will not work properly if you view it in just your regular phone browser. I'll start off with a brief overview about virtual reality. I know we all probably have varying experiences with it. In the last decade or so, VR has expanded beyond the gaming world and has had novel applications in medical education. The interactive and action-oriented aspect of video games seem to translate well into practicing procedural skills with surgery and surgical subspecialties. But in addition to teaching residents competency with procedures, medical educators and graphic designers also collaborated to create computer-generated experiences to simulate clinical scenarios and assess learners' decision-making skills during these interactions with simulated patients. Similar to in situ simulations, learners have been shown to be more engaged in these immersive environments with a feeling of being actually present within the scene, improving their attention and recall of information. Another example of VR in education is the We Are Alfred platform by Embodied Labs, which helps viewers see things from the perspective of an older person who may be losing their vision and hearing. And like I said before, the goal for this talk is to empower you to create your own immersive content without the need for collaboration with graphic design teams and programmers. During this session, we want to show you how we were able to create our own educational content with a 360-degree camera and editing software. So to just clarify some terms that I found confusing when I was researching all of this, virtual reality and 360-degree video are often used interchangeably when you search for 360-degree videos to watch online. Both are immersive and give you the sense of being present within the environment or scenario that you experience through the VR headset, since both block out your vision of what is going on around you when you're viewing the headset. In fact, 360-degree video is also sometimes called immersive video or spherical video, or sometimes you'll just see it or you just hear it called 360 video. It's different from actual virtual experience in that these cameras are filming a real environment with real people. VR experiences are created by graphic designers. So when you consider how much work goes into creating an artificial or virtual but still very realistic environment with people in it, this can often be very costly and take time to develop. And as you've seen with this screenshot that I showed earlier, some of the computer generated people can look a little odd for your viewers and might lead to distractions with the learning process. Another difference is that with 360-degree videos, you as the viewer are an observer in that experience, with limited interactions when compared to other VR experiences, but it all depends on what hosting platform your experience is showcased in and if you're able to design hotspots or quizzes or flashcards within your immersive experience. Things like the ability to reach down and open the code cart drawers to look inside aren't really doable with a 360-degree video, but you can get creative around those limitations or have text that you can hover over to explain what's in that code cart. You also cannot move around the room with a 360-degree video like you can for many VR experiences. For the most part, the viewer is stationary but able to look around in all different directions. So when comparing 360 video to in-person simulations, one of the advantages of using 360-degree video is that we can practice social distancing and decrease repeated use of simulation facilities and equipment. And depending on your educational goals, you can also promote asynchronous learning with more flexibility with timing for your faculty and learners, including the ability for your learners to watch the experience multiple times or slow down or pause the experience as needed. Both teaching modalities are similar in that your viewers can learn in their regular or at least a very familiar clinical environment, whether this is in your patient rooms, your resuscitation areas, or your simulation center. So you'll see that 360-degree video brings about elements from both VR and in-person simulation in a way that may be more accessible for you and your learners during this unique time as a supplement to other forms of medical education. So with all that in mind, let's now talk about how to get started with creating your 360-degree immersive experience. We'll first go over the setup and the equipment and software that you'll need. So 360-degree cameras are omnidirectional, as in they record in all directions, which gives you a video product that you can then view on VR headsets or head-mounted displays, as they're sometimes called. Your viewers can look all the way around them during this experience. This graphic shows your recording as kind of a donut, but what you'll actually get is more of a spherical view where your viewers can look up and down, left and right, all the way around them to see behind them. So 360-degree cameras have at least two lenses that you'll actually have separate videos from each of those lenses. And you'll see raw footage look like this. So you'll have the front of the camera capturing one part of the room and the back camera capturing the other part. So most cameras come with their own stitching software where we go from this raw footage to this, which is called an equirectangular view. These days, with technologic improvements and better support for 360-degree videos online, you can actually upload this view directly to your video platforms, and your viewers will see the spherical video right away. Or you can edit these files further with video editing software and upload that product afterwards. Another clarification before we move forward, 360-degree video is not the same as 3D video. 3D videos are typically filmed with two lenses that are side by side to each other, and the end product is that each of your eyes is receiving a slightly different perspective in order to create that 3D effect. To add to the confusion, there are 360-degree cameras that are also 3D cameras, but those aren't part of our discussion today as they require a lot more computer processing power and hard drive space with the editing process, and you may be limited in how you can distribute those kinds of videos to your learners. So I want to show you an example of a 360-degree video that I made for this workshop. When you view these videos on your computer, you can click and drag the screen as I'm doing right now to follow me around the room. Or you can use these toggle buttons that you see up here to look up, down, left, and right. So you see here what I was explaining earlier in that you as the viewer are stationary and the camera stays in one spot. From personal experience, keeping the camera and thus your intended viewers stationary not only simplifies the production process, but also helps decrease nausea or motion sickness when viewing. And when you view this experience on an actual VR headset, the headset actually has software that follows your head movement. So you're able to just look naturally around the room and you don't have to click and drag anything or use any controllers or anything to move around. Here's another example of a 360-degree video that I made where we recorded a scripted pediatric trauma simulation. You as the viewer are standing over my shoulder and you're able to see the patient and other members of the trauma resuscitation team around you and behind you as they go about their assigned duties. So you can look and see that Janice, who's playing the patient's mother, is going to the patient, and then I'm turning around to look at something, which is talking to our medical student and our resident on the computer putting in orders. So another application of this method that our team has used is a video where you as the viewer are experiencing the patient-doctor interaction from the patient's perspective. The overlying dialogue that I have muted at the beginning here is meant to communicate the patient's thoughts and worries while waiting for the doctor to see them. And you'll see that as the doctor enters the room, he's looking right at you and talking directly with you. And then we have the scene cut to more of an observer view that you can think of as kind of like a medical student who's in the room who's now observing the interaction. So in order to set these things up, think of your camera and your tripod as your viewer during the experience. So in the PEDS trauma case, the camera is the observer during the resuscitation. You want the observer to see what's happening, but also not be in the way. And this camera isn't really able to zoom in or out, so not seeing the details of the rhythm changes on a monitor or what's inside a drawer is difficult to portray. So how we address this is by saying the changes out loud or providing clarifications for things that the viewers might not be able to see very well. You want your camera to be the height of an actual person, or in our PEDS trauma case, I actually made it a little bit taller than me in order for the viewer to be able to see the patient over my shoulder and other members of the team or other pieces of equipment that are on the other side of my head. Um, as far as our other case, when the viewer was experiencing things from the patient's perspective, we placed the camera on the bed at sitting height so our viewers were able to look up at the doctor as he was standing and asking questions. There are limitations to these perspectives in that when you're a viewer, you can't see your own body when you look down as you would in real life. And so that can be a bit different from VR experiences when you're meant to see something from a patient's perspective, where you can't see your own hands, you can't see your own body. I'll add to what I said earlier about 360-degree video having elements of both VR, in-person simulation, and what I'm calling traditional video. For those of you who may have some experience with creating your own videos, even if it's just with your phone, I also wanted to review the differences between experiencing and making 360-degree videos and traditional video. Of course, the whole purpose of 360-degree video is that level of immersion for your viewers as they watch this on their headsets. They'll also be able to see actions in parallel, as you saw with our trauma resuscitation, which is great for complex scenarios like that. Also, as I said before, your camera becomes the viewer, so you can have an experience where your perspective may be very important for your learning goals. Some of the other differences between 360-degree video and traditional video are that you cannot control where your viewer looks once you distribute your video. You almost have to count on them being interested in something enough to look directly at it. And with the camera recording in all directions, you also can't really hide your other equipment like microphones, cords, simulation facilitators, or the camera operator. So once you've thought of your scenario and set up for it, the next step is to consider what equipment you're going to use. The camera that we use for our projects is the Insta360 1X, which has two wide angle lenses on the front and the back. There are many other affordable cameras available now with improved technology, depending on what your budget situation is. You'll also find cameras that are much more expensive, but with more lenses available and therefore higher quality videos, if that's important and feasible for you and the rest of your team. These cameras will also require more stitching, as you'd imagine, with all the different video angles. The main thing that I'd say is important for those of us not working with professional video or design teams is that you should make sure that the camera that you choose comes with its own software to stitch together your raw footage automatically, as this was a pretty intimidating barrier in the past when it had to be done manually. Most newer 360-degree cameras have their software available for download on their main websites or pretty user-friendly, so you can always watch tutorials online. Other equipment that you'll definitely need for your setup is a tripod. You want your camera to get at that person height. So if you have experience with professional filming or even just on your own, you'll recognize tripods as these big, bulky things that are very stable for your heavy cameras. But these don't work well for 360-degree cameras, as the area near the camera often takes up a lot of room, creating a large footprint, and the stitching software may have difficulty in removing this. With a lot of the 360-degree video makers, what they're using now is a tripod that looks more like this on the right, which is a more narrow area that's near the camera and the legs coming out further away from the camera, which makes the stitching process much more simple. And this setup is a little less stable than with your traditional tripods, which makes it even more important that your camera stay out of the way during your complex scenarios with a lot of people involved. You saw during our trauma resuscitation, prior to that scene, there was like a EMS provider wheeling in the patient. So you got to be really careful with this setup. So here's a screenshot from one of the videos that I showed you earlier so that you can see what I'm talking about. So what you're looking at the top is you're looking straight down at where your own feet would be when you're looking through a VR headset. So you can see a bit of the tripod and the camera software's attempts at hiding it during the stitching process. So what a lot of people do and what I've done to address this is to add a logo at the bottom of the video to cover this area up, which can be done with the software that comes with the camera or your own video editing software later on. Another thing to consider during this process is that the internal microphones in these cameras are not great for the most part. And hospitals and a lot of indoor spaces like sim centers have a lot of background noise that we don't think about. Blanket warmers, refrigerators, even fluorescent lights all make some degree of background noise that the camera microphones cannot really tune out very well compared to our actual ears. And this becomes obvious when you're making your video and playing it through speakers. One way around this is using microphones for people who are speaking in order to optimize your audio. So lavalier or lapel mics like the ones that we used are easy to clip on to people and aren't too obvious visually, as you can see here. Additionally, again, the traditional film production with professional teams, you'll often have several different microphones on set, but off camera to capture your sound. But these will be visible when you film with the 360-degree camera, if that's another thing that you need to consider. When you use these clip-on mics, you also need an audio recorder that can then be placed in people's pockets to hide the cords. You'll end up with separate audio files that you then need to edit in with separate editing software, usually not the software that comes with your camera. So I've been mentioning editing software a lot, and I know this can be the most daunting part of the process, and hopefully I can make things a little easier to digest. You'll need software that's capable of editing 360-degree videos. So this is not your iMovie program that comes with your Mac computer if you have that, but there are many friendly, user-friendly programs out there that shouldn't be too difficult to at least try out and see if you can do it. The two big video editing software programs that I use for this that I considered were Final Cut Pro and Adobe Premiere Pro. These are both very common editing software programs that people use in the video production business. Final Cut Pro is mostly used on Mac computers, while Adobe Premiere Pro is primarily used on PCs. We happen to be using Final Cut Pro since I had experience with that. But you can get either one working on either type of computer with the right workarounds. So you can see that the upfront cost is similar. However, Adobe Premiere Pro is a subscription service with monthly or yearly options available. They're both arguably very similar in workflow and capabilities that most professionals will debate upon, but a lot of it just comes down to user preference. There are a lot of other programs that are available that are affordable or even free, which are great for people who are just trying out the editing process. And again, I know these programs can be intimidating, but luckily there are many online tutorials available to help get you started. Here's some videos that I used about learning Final Cut Pro for beginners just to help refresh myself. And there are also tutorials on how to edit 360-degree videos when, again, I was teaching myself how to do this new editing process. And again, there are a lot of other great videos online, but I hope this at least gets you started. We will have links to all these videos in our supplemental document page that we'll provide at the end of this workshop. So now for the big question, what's your budget? Like I said before, we use the Insta360 One X, which costs about $400, as you can see. Many cameras will come with their own tripods that you can, or you can bundle and save when you buy them from their websites, or you can get cheaper ones online through retailers like B&H stores or Amazon. We also used Final Cut Pro to edit our videos, again, since that's what I had experience in, and I wanted to be able to optimize our audio. Final Cut Pro costs about $300, but then you'll have to take into account that you need a computer that is capable of editing videos. Most newer Macs and MacBooks can edit videos, but I'd highly recommend that you have enough hard drive space because these video files can be much bigger than traditional video files. And so what I did, I already had a computer and I already had an external hard drive that I've been using to edit my videos. And again, because we wanted to optimize our audio with microphones, which then needed audio recorders, this was another thing that we added to our budget. These can have a huge range in pricing, and you should just make sure that you read the customer reviews first, which is super easy when you're buying them online. So in total, what our budget was altogether was under $1,000, which is pretty amazing when you consider how much it costs for having computer design developers, computer generating all your images, all your rooms and equipment. It really depends on what you want to do and how much time you'd like to actually invest in this. It's definitely optional to use the external audio system, like I was saying, and the video editing software. So you just need to assess what the rest of your team wants and figure out what your needs are in your institution. So another thing to talk about is how you're going to distribute your content to your learners. So YouTube is a great platform for playing videos, and it's free. And I want to pause briefly here to remind you to download the YouTube app onto your phone so I can show you a demo in the next couple minutes. There are other platforms available. NYU happens to have institutional access with a platform called Wanda VR, which has some more capabilities like the ability to insert hotspots within your video to link to other videos or resources. You can put in quizzes for people to complete during the experience, and they just use their hand controllers to select the right option. It's helpful to get in touch with your institution's media department to see what may be available to you so that you can best plan your scenario and see what your teaching methods are during the actual experience. And as I showed you earlier, these videos can be shown on a flat computer screen and also on smartphones, but for a true immersive experience, they're shown on VR headsets. The big name out right now is Oculus. We chose to have 4 Oculus Quests in order to have the ability for multiple residents to use our headsets at a time when they're on their pediatric emergency medicine rotation. Oculus also recently released the Quest 2, which is actually cheaper and lighter. I haven't had a chance yet to try it out, but I've heard some good things about it. And there are other VR headsets that are available, and you just need to do a little bit more research into what their capabilities are. And there are even cool things like Google Cardboard that can convert your smartphone into a VR headset. All right, so this is where we're scanning the QR code again, if you guys have the YouTube app available. So scan this and open it in the YouTube app, and it, again, will not work in your phone's regular browser. And what this shows is a video that I showed you guys earlier of me walking around our trauma bay in our hospital. So you should be able to see if you scan it, and it'll track your movements as you're moving your phone around, and you can look up, down, and all around. And you can see that the positioning is pretty seamless with this. You don't have to drag the screen, you don't have to click around. And again, this link will be available in our supplement, and the QR code will be available in our supplementary document, so you can view this later. And lastly, what is your content going to be? The planning phase is a very important process that helps streamline the recording process for later. You may have already have a scenario in mind, given how much work you're putting into making this experience. You want the scenario to be high yield, but also feasible with what your facility's resources and capabilities are. This is also going to be recorded, so choosing a case where you can take advantage of visual cues is also very important. So when we were thinking of cases that would be high yield for learners, we knew that trauma and toxic ingestion cases would be great to teach about, at least on the pediatric side. However, tox cases where you have to note pupils, EKG changes, other details that would be relatively difficult to portray versus that large bruise that you saw in the mannequin's abdomen. The ability to see team's dynamics for ATLS were things that we considered in the initial planning stages. We also wanted a case where viewers could be engaged. With the limitations of using recorded simulations, this was an observer during a resuscitation, but still next to the action. So most of you with backgrounds in medical education and writing sim cases already know about meeting learning objectives. And coming up with these goes hand in hand with understanding how the production process works and how you're going to set up your scenario. Again, you should be able to justify putting all this work into making these videos. Do you want to show a resuscitation scenario where your learners are introduced to a team's actions happening in parallel? Do you want to teach empathy and understanding of patients by showing it from their view? What does the 360-degree immersive but observational nature of this product bring to the experience over traditional video or even just in-person simulation? And again, we'd love to hear your ideas in the comment box if you have them or want to talk about them. I do also recommend making a script since this is basically a recorded session and your learners will be able to watch this over and over again. You want to consider if you're showing them best practices or more of a realistic scenario, such as dealing with systems issues. Going off a script also helps ensure that you're making a productive experience for your learners and your participants. So the script will help with timing and making sure that everyone involved is on the same shared mental model for what the case is trying to teach or show. You want all the information you wanted to share be touched upon. This isn't like a simulation in-person case where you can kind of ad lib some of the things in if people forget something. So this is an example of a script that I wrote for our PEDS trauma scenario. You do not need to write it in this format. The font and spacing of the margins is just supposed to give you a rough estimate of how long your scenario is going to be. But there are differences when compared to traditional video in that things are happening in parallel at the same time, and the viewer can turn their head towards that rather than have these things happen off camera. You can write your script however you'd like, and you just need it to guide your participants and highlight your important points, similar to when writing your sim cases. This is just an example of what we used for our PEDS trauma case. Recruiting people to be your actors in your video can be tricky for this. You generally want to find people who are comfortable with being on camera, able to speak and enunciate clearly while being recorded. It was great working with standardized patients for some of our videos, but this is not always possible. One thing that I felt was important for our PEDS trauma case was showcasing residents and nurses in their actual roles. I was hoping to engage learners while seeing a similar scenario to what they would be seeing in real life with their co-residents playing themselves and nurses and other staff also playing themselves, rather than, let's say, having all my co-fellows and attendings playing the residents and nurses. I'll hand things over to Janice now to discuss more of the content creation process from a sim facilitator perspective.
Thank you, Mary Jo. All right. So then how do we establish and maintain psychological safety in virtual reality design using 360-degree video? I'd like to begin with the definition of psychological safety. Psychological safety is a sense of safety that enables effective learning conversations. When we talk about simulation exercises, psychological safety can create a friendly environment that encourages learning-oriented behaviors, including reflection on action or voicing one's thoughts to the group. It also can prevent defensive behaviors on perceived threat to learners' professional identity. Then, what are the advantages of VR in creating psychologically safe environment? First, okay, great. First, you get to create your own organizational culture to build a psychologically safe and effective learning environment. Organizational culture is important component. It often dictates a learning culture and teamwork, especially in an insight to simulation involving multidisciplinary or interprofessional interactions. Using 360-degree video, you get to establish the type of learning environment where learners feel safe enough to embrace being uncomfortable and face meaningful challenges. Second, your educational content can be tailored to a variety of learners, including medical students, residents, nurses, and also interprofessional teams. Third, VR can mimic the environment learners train and work, which can increase familiarity and proficiency with critical and rare clinical cases. This can be useful for accessibility to insight to simulations, which is what we did for our insight to pediatric trauma simulation at Bellevue Hospital. Also, this can be especially convenient in this COVID pandemic, where the number of participants in-person simulation is limited due to social distancing. However, VR can provoke anxiety or unfamiliarity among learners, especially as they're expected to use a VR headsets or other VR platforms. This could impede learning by decreasing buy-in to the simulation endeavors or fidelity. So, to create and maintain psychologically safe learning space, pre-simulation pre-briefing and debriefing are critical parts of 360-degree video educational content to maximize the benefits as an innovative educational modality. So what are the specific techniques? As many of you might know, pre-briefing is an important part of simulation as it establishes the tone of subsequent virtual simulation and debriefing. It can significantly impact learners' engagement. So as we do so in in-person simulation, VR simulation using 360-degree video should also begin with pre-briefing. We recommend you begin pre-briefing with basic assumption that we believe that everyone participating in activities is intelligent, capable, and cares about doing their best. It wants to improve. This is a core value developed by the Center for Medical Simulation. It acknowledges a learner's effort in their improvement and potentiates their motivation. Pre-briefing also allows instructors to clarify learning objectives and expectations and logistics for learners who access the materials asynchronously or for learners who are unfamiliar with the clinical setting. By clearly stating learning goals, learners can approach the virtual simulation for specific new knowledge and perspectives. A fiction contract is an important collaborative agreement between instructors and learners. Engaging in a simulated environment can be challenging since learners must pretend as if they are in a clinical space. The instructor's effort to make the situation as realistic as possible and an acknowledgement of the limitation of simulation can really promote learners' willingness to accept this virtual simulation as fully as possible. This is an example of our insight to peds trauma. You can take the pre-briefing as an opportunity to introduce the learners into the learning space so they can orient themselves before the case begins. I'm currently scrolling through my computer screen, so even if the learner does not have a VR set, they can actually go around and look at the room, up and down, and actually engage with the pre-briefer. There are also strategies to maintain psychological safety during debriefing of 360-degree video simulation. Debriefing is a facilitated reflection that can help learners identify performance gaps, explore the rationale for behaviors, and define solutions. It is a powerful educational tool that can help emphasize learning objectives and reinforce positive behaviors. So, a virtual simulation platform should also reflect the practices of debriefing that are known to establish and maintain psychological safety in in-person simulation. In this case, your educational content should deliberately include both explicit and implicit strategies. As an explicit strategy, Debriefers should begin by clearly describing learning points. For example, you could lay down the roadblocks of debriefing, such as we're going to discuss about X, Y, and Z and explore in depth about these concepts. Debriefers also should clarify their roles. And if they're co-debriefers, this is a time to identify them. It is helpful for learners if debriefers convey a commitment to respecting them and understanding their perspectives. VR educational content should also incorporate implicit strategies. These include verbal and nonverbal cues, such as securing a quiet filming location, arranging the debriefing space in a circle to promote active discussion, and placing participants at the same eye level. Also, in co-facilitated situations, co-debriefers should sit separately, ideally across from each other, to demonstrate that it is important to tend to nonverbal cues of co-debriefers and learners. As psychological safety is a dynamic and fragile perception, minor disrespectful behaviors can negatively impact learners' feelings. The film should demonstrate the congruity between actions and words of participants to protect psychological safety throughout simulation and debriefing. For example, it will be important for instructors to avoid including actions or words that could potentially breach psychological safety in the scenario, such as a lack of eye contact. This is an example of debriefing where learners are standing in a circle at the same eye level. I'm gonna just go around the room. And the learners can actually look at the view, look into the room as a debriefing is going in and switch perspective of whoever is speaking next. Pre-briefing and debriefing should extend to participants of filming as well. Similar to remote learners, on-site pre-briefing is important to state basic assumptions and clarify learning objectives and expectations of a simulated case, as participants are likely going to be your learners in your own institution. Also, this is an opportunity to discuss the logistical details because as walking through of the case with participants can identify potential restraints and challenges instructors didn't expect to face prior to filming. On top of that, unlike simulation exercises in an in situ or lab setting, the confidentiality or privacy of participants' performance cannot be protected with the purpose of dissemination of the video content. So this is an opportunity to remind the participants about the scripted nature of scenario and answer any further questions. Then you should obtain informed written consent prior to initiating the filming. Your institution will have its own non-patient multimedia consent forms. This is an example of NYU's consent form. Your institution will likely have a form like this that you can use. We just recommend making sure that it includes participants' agreement to release a film for the intended purpose. Here's our contact information and our video checklist. As we discuss under equipment and content, as Mary Jo discussed, we will be sending out a link or a QR code later on to the supplemental materials. And the next one. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Janice, for everyone with your participation during our hour. We're more than happy to discuss further if you want to reach out over email or our Twitter handles that Janice had in the previous slide. Before you leave for the rest of your conference, we really do appreciate you filling out our post-experience survey with this QR code. I can also paste the link in the chat right now. Here. But happy to take any questions from anyone right now. And then I'm also pasting the link for our supplemental document for all of the camera equipment and all the sample videos that we talked about during the presentation. And then I'll go ahead and paste our contact info too.
Hi, this is Josh Broder from Duke. Thanks for a great presentation. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Hi.
I apologize that I missed a little bit of the beginning, and so you might have covered some of this, but can you talk a little bit about how long did it take to film one of these, and what kind of financial cost did you encounter?
Yeah, it's so great question. I do have a background in video making, so I feel like it might have been, but I did have to learn how to use 360 cameras and all of that. The actual filming process for the video where it was like the patient interaction with just a patient and just a doctor, that we did that in an afternoon. We did three of those actually, so we filmed three separate like 10-minute encounters like that. So the filming process itself wasn't the majority of the work. It was actually the prep and how what we wanted our script to be, what we wanted our learning objectives to be. And like for people who are making their own educational materials, I feel like a lot of that is that what you're doing is that prep and making sure that you have all of what you want to say within the recorded experience, because it's going to be played over and over again. So the actual filming was an afternoon. The editing process for me took a couple days. I was also working clinically, so might have taken a day if I with the three videos if I had the time for that. But I also tend to make things a little bit more complicated, and I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, so that's how long it took for us.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And then I think budget, we had a slide up from before about how much the actual equipment cost. It was under $1,000 for the camera, the tripod. I used a microphone with audio recorder. And yeah, that was under 1,000. And the VR headsets are about 300 each.
Great. Thank you again. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
We have a next question. Rachel, do you feel that advantages of VR education is worth all the efforts and investment, or is it another fancy toy? It's a great question.
Great question. This is one of my passions, and so I feel like it's a worthy investment. I feel like just from what I've experienced over the last year or so with the residents is that they find it pretty engaging. There are some things I'd like to do in addition to kind of optimize the experience for people. I don't like blaming things on COVID, but COVID did not help with this process, and so it's one thing that I want to do moving forward with the next year in my simulation program. It is a fancy toy, though. In all honesty, it's a really cool thing. I'm hoping that it has its own place with providing like a supplemental form of education.
I also wanted to add that a lot of institutions are starting to use a VR as a part of a onboarding process. So before even you go into, let's say for new faculty member coming into institution, before you go into the shadow shift, this will be a really great opportunity for the newcomers to get familiar with their setup and possibly how people run resuscitation. So it kind of goes beyond medical student and resident education, but also faculty development and more operation side as well.
And then it looks like, what about panorama with simple movement on an iPad? I think that would also work. As in just taking a panoramic shot. Is that what you're saying, William?
Yeah, I think you have to have the right software to sort of make it all happen. But I have seen sort of the AV wizards where they take, a couple of panoramic photos, and then I don't know exactly what software they're using to put the scavenger hunt things within the, and then you can just take the iPad and move it, and then you're at a particular spot and you can tap on something and then it will tell you what that is, or
yeah, like a still photo.
Right. So for orientation, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. That's something also very doable. The software that's used it's called stitching software that's used to make those panoramic shots, like even on your smartphone when you're yourself taking a photo where you're just like going around a scene. It's very, very similar to the stitching software that's used to create the 360 like spherical video. But yeah, definitely something that would be doable.
Have you used this for sort of orientation to anything, like orientation to the trauma bay, orientation to hand washing, like anything sort of, because it seems like that would be a natural place for it, that, I'm a med student, it's my first time in the environment of X, and like, so here it is, like, you know, how do I wash my hands without then contaminating them on the way into the OR? How do I, right?
Yeah,
What is all this
definitely.
stuff? Yeah. So,
Definitely. I think that would be a great application for it,
yeah.
especially
Okay.
because you could replay it over and over again for different people and it would still be very relevant.
I
Nice to
remember
get it
from
all
our
created.
last different presentation that there were participants who were using these for their nursing colleagues as a hand washing, as a VR for their work safety and
Right.
quality. So it's definitely there's application you can use.
It looks like we have another question. Potential application for low frequency, high stakes procedures in situ. Is the camera easy to set up quickly? So what we used it for was for scripted simulations. I'm not sure if you mean by like for a real patient interaction. The camera itself is pretty easy to set up quickly. Again, you just want to make sure it's in a good location. You can move it. I was saying to keep it stationary, but you can move it if you need to. But definitely, I feel like these kinds of scenarios, it would be great to have for those low frequency, high stakes procedures. Again, I use pediatric trauma as an example, but again, other experiences might be very helpful. I don't know if that answered your question, and when.
I think it really comes down to your learning objectives at the end. If it's because it worked really well for our in situ trauma because it involves multiple people, clinical space, and in situ, but also getting familiar with the spaces and where to grab things, who's supposed to do what. But if your learning objectives really for the procedural competency, it might not be the best, as Mary just said, like because it's filming the whole area. You're not really able to zoom into particular steps if the learner have a question. So I think it's definitely applicable, but I think really it's up to your learning objectives.
Thank you. And again, please feel free to reach out to us if you have further questions. I know it's a lot of information. You guys have had a lot of great presentations so far during this conference, I know. And so we really, really enjoy having these discussions with you.